Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today for this question and answer session regarding the COVID-19 vaccine. First of all, and very importantly, Happy Nurses Day to all of our nurses here at DCMC. Hopefully you've had a great day, and we've tried to celebrate that in a number of different ways, but you deserve celebration every day. Hopefully that's clear, and we want to continue to celebrate all of our employees on an ongoing basis. Everybody does such a great job. So, but happy Nurses Day, congratulations, and I hope you've had a good day. I've got Dr. Heise sitting here with me, and we're going to try to tackle some of your questions today regarding the COVID-19 vaccine. The statistics on that, as I may have mentioned in my invitation to everyone, is that 80% of our workforce has been vaccinated at this point. We're pretty pleased with that rate. In fact, if you compare that to other healthcare systems throughout the state, that's pretty favorable. Dr. Heise was on a call early this morning, where it kind of gave us the indication that we're towards the top of the state in terms of our vaccination rate of employees. So we're happy about that. But it also means that 150 of us have not chosen to have the vaccination yet, and so we just want to talk about that. We want to talk about what that means for all of us working together, and continue to provide education on things that we've learned about the vaccine over time. And again, just most importantly, answer any questions that you have. So, we've done this several times over the past year, and we'll use the same format. You can always bring yourself off of mute and ask a question if you'd like. You can also type your questions into the chat. And what we added this time is, because of the sensitivity of this topic for some folks, we wanted people to be able to submit questions in advance as well. And so I've received several of those. So I appreciate your trust in me, because obviously I know who you are, who submitted the question, but I'm not going to read your name as I pose the question. We'll just read your question, and we'll talk about it that way. So, anything you'd like to add in terms of introductory comments?
No, I guess just thank you for logging on and listening to us today. Hope you've got some good questions. I think as far as it crosses my mind when you say we wanted to allow you the opportunity to send the questions anonymously, so there was no sense of feeling awkward, and that's. From my perspective, obviously I'm a doctor. I think we should all get vaccinated, but the last thing that I want is for anyone to feel awkward about their choice. Everyone has to make a choice that makes the most sense for them. That's just all there is to it. We may get to a point down the road where we need to, along with other healthcare organizations, mandate it. We're not there. So I don't want anyone to feel as though they should feel awkward. You make the best choice that you think for yourself. So I think that's just important that I say that, because I don't believe that shaming ever has worked and isn't the way to go when it comes to trying to maybe let you know what we think is important about the vaccines.
Yeah, that's good. And we've got a couple of questions were submitted, and we'll handle those towards the end. They're kind of about that, about how we treat each other, given everyone's vaccination status, and in some cases where we don't know everyone's vaccination status. So what does that mean? So we'll talk through some of that. Before we get there, let's just tackle some kind of nuts and bolts vaccine questions. The first one that was submitted is, we've been researching things like HIV since the 1980s, and we don't have any vaccine for that. So how is it that we have a vaccine so quickly for this new disease, and how is it a good choice for us to move forward with administering that on a broad level, because it is so new?
Right. And that's a really good question. And the person that submitted it, and I don't even know who it was, put a "we," which I liked, because "we" in quotes, which is so true, because you hear that, oh, we've been doing this for many years. Who the heck is we? But when those comments are made, HIV is one of those things that they had hoped they were going to be able to figure out a vaccine early on and right away. And there are some viruses that vaccines just don't work for. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. But HIV has been one of those. It's been really, really tough to get to the bottom of it. So the whole messenger RNA vaccine situation, so when we talk about they've been looking at it in HIV and now they came up with it for COVID, when we're talking about messenger RNA, that has been researched over the last 10 plus years or so in the context of looking for a vaccine or even more, a cure for HIV, and also for cancer, for sort of specific ways to treat cancer. So messenger RNA as a technology and as a delivery system into the cells is not new in that sense. And so we already have a decade, by we again, the scientists that are smarter than I, already have a decade of experience working with that. And so when it came, what I read about the progression of things, as soon as it became clear last January that this was going to be a problem, scientists and drug companies and other labs, they had the SARS-CoV-2 virus sequenced and mapped before the middle of January. I mean, they had it done that quick. And as soon as they did, they started working with that existing technology because they had been kind of waiting, so to speak, for the right opportunity, and that presented itself. So that's kind of the reason why, in a nutshell, why we talk about HIV, yet there's no vaccine. Nothing to do with the messenger RNA. It has everything to do with the fact that HIV is just a tough virus to be able to vaccinate for. So I hope that answers that question. It doesn't have any role in, why did this come out so quick when it's been 10 years for vaccine? We can talk more, if you think we should, we can talk more about why this seemed to have gone so quickly.
Yeah, do you want to just touch on that real quick?
So, I mean, again, because as of January, we already had the DNA mapped, or the RNA, I should say more appropriately, mapped. It's an RNA virus, mapped. They were able to start that work. What it comes down to, and the way that I process it in my feeble brain, is that with most new drugs, with most vaccines, these companies, it's very expensive to do this. They have to wait until the FDA starts to give them the idea that it's going to be approved. And so all the work that's been done is very stepwise, and they have to be very cautious about it. Obviously, we were in a global pandemic, and so it was job one for everyone on the planet to try and figure out how can we stop this. And we have known from day one that a pandemic like this, the only way out of it is through vaccination. That's the only way. So as a result, there was that urgency that was put forth. On top of all that, because we knew that whatever came out, as long as it was shown to work, it was going to be approved because it needed to be. Then the Pfizer, as an example, they made millions and millions of doses of the vaccine long before there was ever any approval, understanding that even if this first batch was bad, doesn't matter, it's going to help us for the second batch. Having said all that, it's important to understand that every step that normally takes place for a vaccine approval took place here. And that's why it's so remarkable, because the quickest that a vaccine came to market before COVID-19 vaccine was the polio vaccine. No, I'm sorry, not the polio, mumps. And that was in the 60s, 50s and 60s, I want to say. That was 4 years. But again, the reason is because there was such a global effort to get on top of this, and companies were making the product way ahead of time. So hope that makes some sense. So I have been very convinced, and the science is very clear, that no steps were bypassed in getting this to market.
Yeah, and you and I were talking before the call. Some news came out yesterday, I guess, regarding how Pfizer has plans to submit for full approval, full FDA approval now, and that's going to be kind of the same thing. It's going to go through the same process it always goes through, except that the FDA has already said that even though typically it may take a couple of years to go through full FDA approval, they're gonna make sure they get this one done in 6 months. It'll go through all the same steps, but it's a priority, so they'll make it happen.
And it's normally 2 years.
Yeah.
To go through that at least. So again, I think everyone sort of knows. It's one of those things too. I heard a quote from a vaccinologist that I respect on a podcast I was listening to, and he had made the comment that you want to get the first, I forget if it was 7 million or 70 million. I think it was 7 million. You want to get the first 7 million doses in. Once you get it in, then you can breathe a sigh of relief, because once that happens and there's no horrible untoward side effects, you're home free. Well, we're at almost 200 million doses now. So I think, thankfully there were no, I don't think any of us expected, because the safety and efficacy data from the phase 3 trials were very, very good, which is why I was confident in getting it. And thankfully we've seen that.
Yeah. Just a story. It's probably too early in the call to be going on tangents, but here I go.
My whole life is a tangent.
When my wife and I, Amy, lived in Nashville. We went to church with another family, and their kids were in the youth group, and Amy and I were young and thought we could help out with the youth group and those sorts of things. But we got to know this family, and the gentleman's name, the dad, is Dr. Mark Dennison, and he's a researcher at Vanderbilt University. And he's dedicated his life to studying SARS viruses.
Oh, wow.
And he'll tell the story that he, after 20, 30 years of doing this, had nearly given up on it just because, just studying a virus in mice for that long and just couldn't see the relevance to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was on a vacation trying to figure out kind of what he was going to do next in his life, and got the call, what would that have been, 2007, 2008, about SARS, a SARS outbreak.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, everything he had been doing for 20, 25 years became relevant.
Yeah.
And then, of course, this year, it's become even more relevant because he's been right in the middle of all the vaccine development and all of that sort of thing. And so knowing Dr. Mark Dennison, who's a very faithful man, he would say, God's been in this all along. And that's the way I kind of like to think about it too. And so a lot of this, having a vaccine within a year, yes, I mean, it's been a tremendous feat of science. And it's also been a tremendous feat of faith.
I think that's true. That's a great point. I hadn't thought of it that way, because it really, we look at it, and I know having been in this business for 20 years, it amazes me how everything's come together the way that it has, and it's worked. So it was one thing initially in December when we were first getting the vaccine, and I think all of us kind of held our breath to sort of say, well, in my case, I wanted this to work so badly. So for me, it's like I held my arm out, I'll get the vaccine, being prepared if anything would happen. And we just kept holding our breath, and thankfully now we're 200 million doses in, or almost that, and there hasn't been any horrible effects. And so, I think there's a lot to be said for there being a divine plan here, or divine, if that's how you choose to look at it, but I think I do.
And it's a good segue into the next question, which is, when watching the news, I'm hearing about deaths in more cases, and it's hard to find information about how well the vaccine is working and what type of impact it's having on people and hospitals. I wish they would do more on TV to encourage me to get the vaccine instead of just telling me to do it. So show me. As a medical professional, we love to know the science behind all of it. So that's a good segue to, the vaccine really is working. You talk about 200 million doses, and so some news came out today that I'll just kind of read from. The U.S. is reporting the lowest daily COVID-19 case averages since early October, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. About 49,000 new U.S. cases are being recorded each day. That's the lowest number in almost 7 months. Hospitalizations are also hovering around 40,000, which is similar to early fall levels. And about 700 virus deaths are reported each day, down from a January peak of more than 3,000 deaths a day. So is it having an impact? It's absolutely having an impact. And if you look at the states around us, Michigan's gone through an outbreak, Minnesota's gone through an outbreak. And I think in Wisconsin, I think we were very fortunate, and just kind of, it was just a luck of how well timed our vaccine rollout was. Otherwise, I think we'd have been right there with them throughout this winter. So any other stats that you're hearing that kind of prove that the vaccines are working?
Not number statistics, but I mean, just if you look at the spike in cases that Michigan had, that even Oregon has recently had, they're able to get over that a lot faster. And one of the big things that these days, which is one of the demonstrations of what happens when you don't vaccinate, or in the case of India, which is what I'm referring to, they haven't been able to vaccinate quickly enough. Look at what they're going through right now. And there's other factors. So it's not just the fact that they weren't able to get vaccinations out to their populace that quick, but we've seen that's what, at this point, some of the experts that I know of, Dr. Monica Gandhi, who is infectious disease at University of California, San Francisco, her and their department's take is we shouldn't see any major surges anymore, just because there's enough people that are vaccinated. Not that we've hit herd immunity, but that we'll still see spikes, but the spikes are not able to get as high. We also know, as a statistic when it comes to children, that for every 20 points of improvement that we get as far as vaccine uptake, people getting the vaccine in adults, we cut in half the risk for kids. So it directly impacts how our families and how our kids can get through this as well.
And I'm trying to bring up real quickly the, our local numbers as well, because I think even our, obviously a lot smaller sample size when you're just talking about our local population and how well the vaccine is working. But I think it's helpful to understand that it is having an impact here locally as well. So give this just a minute as it pops up. The first graph that comes up here on the left is our inpatient census since the start of the pandemic. And you can see the blue line is our inpatient census and the red line is our number of COVID admissions. And so you can see how that red line has dramatically come down from its peak in mid-November or late October. And then really kind of February through current, we've had very few COVID admissions locally.
Right, and what I can tell you for those COVID admissions that we've had at the very end, those little blips that you see on the red graph at the end, every one of those, and I can think of 5 or 6 over the last maybe 2 months, I'm guessing, that we've had. There have not been very many. They all did not come in with severe illness. They came in with illness enough that benefited the hospitalization was a benefit to them, but they all went home having recovered. So even with still having positives, the degree of severity is not as high.
Good. And then just one other number on this graph. So the blue line on this one is our total number of positive cases over time, and you can see that's really flattened out since January the 1st. And then the red line is our active cases at any given time in Door County. So that peaked at around 800 active cases in late October, early November. And you can see, to me, this is kind of a good news, bad news scenario, right? So since around the beginning of March, we have seen a little bit of an increase. I think, that's the same spike that Michigan saw. Mm-hmm. That's the same spike that Minnesota saw. It's just been less dramatic here because our vaccination rate has been so high.
Right.
At the same time, we can't seem to get down to zero. We're running right now at about 60 active cases in Door County at any given time. And I think that's the impetus for us to continue to try to educate people mm-hmm. on the importance of the vaccine. We've not stamped this thing out.
Right.
And, the danger in not stamping it out is an increased number of variants potentially, mm-hmm. and some of those sorts of things as well.
And one thought for people that correctly might say, I just as soon wait a little while. I was talking to a member of the community, and they commented, I'd like to wait a year or so just to make sure that everything is okay. And I understand that completely. My one response that I would have to that, though, is then be prepared to be stuck with masks and things like that for that year, because while we still have these cases kind of, moving along on the bottom like that, we're not going to be able to fully open back up safely anyway.
Mm-hmm. So the next question is about side effects. The question asks specifically, what are the side effects? I know we prefer to kind of call them immune response or something else, because it may not be a true side effect, but what are we seeing in terms of the immune response? What percentage of the folks who are vaccinating are experiencing that? Anything on that?
Yeah, so nationwide, 30% of people that get the vaccine will have side effects of some kind. And the side effects really are the intended effect, shall I say, of the immune response revving up. You may remember, over the years, at least I have heard people say to me, I got the flu from the flu shot. And one of the things they teach you in medical school and in virology is you can't get the virus from from like the flu. You can't get the flu from the flu shot. This doesn't work that way. But the reason is because the immune system is revving up to get ready for this foreign invader. And the foreign invader that's put into our body with these vaccines now for COVID is just a benign protein that doesn't do anything. But the body says, whoa, wait a minute. I don't recognize this. I don't like this very much. So what happens is all kinds of chemical messengers and chemical mediators are called cytokines and interferons and all these things we heard about in biology class. They go run into the area, not only where you had the shot, so there's the reason for local redness, but also it gets the body teed up, ready to go to fight off the impending march of an invader. And that's what we're feeling. So when you feel nauseous and kind of crummy when you're sick, that's the cytokines and these chemicals that the body is using to fight off a particular bug. So in terms of side effects, what we're seeing is people will have fever, high fever. People will have 101, 102. And it's important to note that how high the fever is never indicative of the severity of a disease process or anything like that. A fever is a fever. No vaccine or even bug will fry your brain. You can never have a fever high enough that's endogenous that your body creates. The only way your brain would fry is if you were in a sauna and you fell asleep, that sort of thing. The other thing people will experience is significant body aches. Again, same thing, those chemicals that go around. Some people will have shaking chills. Some people will have diarrhea. It's kind of almost like what we all call the flu, sort of the stomach bug. That's kind of what you'll feel like. We've also seen some people that have had COVID will get the vaccine and will feel awful right away after that first shot. And then most people then, once that happens, and again, for the same reason, they've already seen COVID once, the body sees it again, even though they're not seeing it for real. And then the body's really ramping up to fight off the second time it sees it. And then the second injection, it probably isn't as bad. But everyone's different. I, for one, didn't have any side effects. My wife did. I believe, Brian, you said you did.
Yeah.
So, it's a variable thing. As I say, about 30% we're finding, maybe a little, and that's across the nation. So there may locally be higher or lower. It's hard to say.
Yeah, and so that's, of course, as you said, the kind of the body's typical immune response and kind of what you would hope, and that happens in about 30% of people in a way that you can feel it. What about like allergic reactions and stuff like that? Are we seeing any of that?
Yeah, there have been some anaphylactic reactions as a result of that, and it has more to do with the little sugar fat globule that at the microscopic level actually brings this messenger RNA into the cell. It's kind of remarkable that we can design something that you can't even see. But some people will have a reaction to that particular chemical. So what we tell people is if you've ever had a severe allergic reaction, anaphylaxis, that sort of thing, to any injectable vaccine in the past, then you probably shouldn't get the coronavirus. You shouldn't get the coronavirus vaccine. So that's kind of what we've seen. Otherwise, we'll see, sometimes rash at the injection site, but that's the most severe. Is my sister-in-law had an anaphylactic reaction, and interestingly, I had texted my brother and said, has she had problems before? And he said, yeah, she gets anaphylaxis from the flu shot. And I said, well, why did she get the vaccine? Well, she thought she wanted to try. That was a bad choice. Yeah. She did fine. She was in a hospital. She works in a hospital, and so she was right there. But
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, and that brings up the point too. We've talked about it, and I'm talking to the forums too about will there come a time where we'll mandate the COVID vaccine like we do the flu shot for employees, and even when that day comes, which I personally I think it will at some point. I think you do too. But when that day comes, there will be a list of valid exceptions,
Absolutely.
right? And so, somebody who's susceptible to an allergic reaction to it and that sort of thing might be one of those exceptions.
Right. Okay.
Does it help for people who have already had COVID to get the vaccine?
Yes, and the reason is because we know that when you've had COVID, we understand as best we can right now it's about 3 to 6 months of immunity. So there's that, but we don't know how long that immunity lasts. And so the hope is with this new vaccine, it's not just the antibody response that we're going to be ramping up with the infection itself. The vaccine will also help ramp up this T cell response. And T cells are just another way that the body recognizes the bug going forward. So the hope is if we can recruit enough T cells involved in this, that it'll take the immunity out further. So that's the part that we still don't really know yet, is how long will this last? Will we have to have a booster? There's a lot of conjecture. We just don't know yet. It's interesting, Brian and I were talking. I mean, we both had our vaccine. It's coming up. It will be coming up on 6 months. And so one wonders. I know I have antibodies because I got them checked because I was curious. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, see how long it lasts. I should have asked this one as a follow-up question a minute ago when we were talking about allergic reactions, but just to go back to that real quick, this person asked, if I'm someone who has allergic reactions to everyday products like cosmetics, shampoos, laundry detergents, that sort of thing, should that make me more concerned about a possible reaction to the COVID vaccine?
Technically, no. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand the hesitation very much. What we understand, again, is when it's being injected, it's going into your muscle cells. So only those people that have had reactions to injectable medications or vaccines, that would be one you should worry.
Okay. And then the final question that I received yesterday was, how long will the vaccine last? And, is there any information about how long they're good for and how often we'll have to get one? And I think you just answered that. We just don't know at this point. I mean, I would think, just like you said, you had a test to see your antibody level. I would think they're doing that in a formal way.
They are.
On some group of people.
Exactly.
To understand when that might be necessary.
The important thing to note, though, in that, as far as that's concerned, is that's the importance of, even if we figure that it's like the flu shot, where, every year, we talk about variants and stuff. Well, that's why the flu shot, you get the flu shot every year. There's variants every single year. I mean, that's not a new phenomenon. Mm-hmm. But the reason for the vaccine now, why get it now, is because the only way we can literally get out of this pandemic and make it more of an endemic kind of a virus, meaning it's one that's around. I don't think SARS-CoV-2 is ever going to go away. COVID-19 is never going to go away. It'll be at such a low level that we can go on about our lives. And if you happen to be one that's not able to be vaccinated or chooses not to be vaccinated and you get sick, well, we can deal with that and hope you do okay, but it's not going to cause mass spread of the infection because enough people around us will have been vaccinated or have innate immunity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to take a couple of questions out of this email that I received. And one of the concerns raised in this email is, if I do have that immune response or those side effects or whatever the case may be, am I going to be sidelined from work for a day or two? And that's a concern for me. I guess the way that I would just answer that part of it is just know that we want to work with you on those things. I mean, if that's a concern for you, we want to be able to work with you on a date that works for you both personally and professionally so that you can get it and maybe you won't have to work the next day or two. If that's if that's something that you're concerned about, we can work around that. Mm-hmm. For sure. Mm-hmm. And so just, definitely work with your supervisor, work with, Leanne in infection prevention about some of those things, and we can find a way to make that work for you, I'm sure. The other concern, though, that was raised in this email is this person says, I also had concerns about the bioethics, and namely fetal tissue of aborted fetuses being used in the testing and the preparation of the vaccines, particularly Johnson & Johnson. And so I did pull some information on that. We have been receiving information on that from the Catholic Church, as you would expect as a Catholic hospital. And I just wanted to read an excerpt from the most recent letter that I received from Bishop Ricken on this, who is the bishop, of course, here in this region of the state. He says the challenge before us is that the recently, this was in March, so I guess it was the recently approved, Johnson & Johnson vaccine against COVID-19 is that it was developed, tested, and produced using cells derived from an abortion. This places it in a very different moral category, according to the Catholic Church, from the existing Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, both of which were only tested using a cell line from abortion. But this letter comes on the heels of another one that all of the bishops in the state of Wisconsin sent back in January. And just to read a little bit from that, it says, if a choice of vaccine is possible, the ones that are least morally compromised should always be requested. However, when there is no choice, the Church teaches that it is morally permissible to receive the vaccine. And it goes on to talk about the promotion of the common good. It says vaccination allows us to fulfill one of the greatest of God's commandments, which is to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so ultimately that's the stance that the Catholic Church has taken on the bioethics involved in the production of these vaccinations. And as it says, the production is a little bit different from that standpoint, and the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines have not been produced using fetus,
right? No fetal tissue.
Aborted fetuses. Yeah. So, anything else that you would say?
No. I think in my mind, it's interesting. Before I even became aware of that, I had seen a YouTube video from a priest that was talking about that, and it just came out of the blue. It was sort of one of those random things, and the common good was what this particular priest was discussing. So I was happy to see that the local diocese came out with that as well.
Yeah. So I have two more questions that were submitted in advance, both of which are less about the vaccine specifically and more about how we interact with each other at work. And so I do want to tackle those, but I also want to open it up. If there are any other questions from anybody who's on the call that you want to either put in the chat or come off of mute and ask us at this time about the vaccines. Okay, well, don't hesitate to do that, and feel free to interrupt me if I'm not giving you enough of a break to get off of mute. But I will go ahead and go into this next question. So this one is, my question is in regard to the treatment of employees who are currently not vaccinated, whatever the reason may be, whether that's health reasons, personal preference, lack of urgency given their age, health status, demographics, or choosing to wait for a final FDA approval. Considering that the vaccination is currently optional for employees, what is our position on and plan of action when employees are made to feel incompetent or uncaring by fellow employees, physicians, or senior leaders if they choose to wait to receive their vaccination? Is this an accepted culture here at DCMC? How do employees move forward from this type of treatment? All right, so I'm going to start by talking about this, and feel free to jump in. I think there's a couple of different levels that we have to consider with this question. One is it's clear that people are passionate on both sides of this, right? And passion in and of itself is not a bad thing. In fact, I think a lot of the passion that we hear around this stems from our patient promise to keep patients first in everything we do. And I believe that there are some people who are employees here who have gone forward with the vaccine, even though that they may have had some concerns personally, but they did so because they had our patients first in mind. And so I think that that's respectable, and I think that that is maybe the root of some of the passion that we hear from employees and physicians and really everyone around this. At the same time, we have to remember that we're living our mission out every day. And, I always keep this book on me and keep it handy to remind me of our values and our I statements. And, our I statements call us to behave in a certain way, particularly in our interactions with each other. And so can we be passionate about our stance on the vaccination or on not getting the vaccination? Absolutely, we can be passionate. But when we talk with each other, we definitely need to do it in a respectful way. And when we cross that line and we don't behave in that way that respects others' opinions, then we're not truly living up to our I statements. And so we're not perfect. We're not going to be able to do this perfectly every day. But this is a good reminder, if we haven't thought about it before, that when we interact with each other on this, that's where we need to come from, is from an area of respect, but also understanding that those who are passionate about it are that way because they're trying to keep the patient first in their minds. So, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't want for anyone to be put down or to feel bad for a choice they made. I don't think that's the path to convincing someone to take the vaccine, to get the vaccine. So I feel bad about that, and I wouldn't want that for anyone. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about it, but it's hard for me because I feel pretty strongly that we should be vaccinated. If we're facing patients, we should be. I know one of the things, I'm human. One of the things that particularly irritates me when it happens, and I try to not react, but it irritates me, is if I'm telling someone I've spent a lot of time, researching this, and I do this for a living, and I've been doing this for 20 years, and someone tells me, well, that's your opinion. That kind of annoys me because it's sort of like, it's not my opinion, it's fact. I mean, this is if I were giving you my opinion that, if I think the sky it's cloudy today or something, it's a little different. So that annoys me. That would never excuse me, would never be an excuse for me to come across in a disrespectful way to you. So I guess I'm just kind of babbling, but bottom line is I really feel bad. I don't think anyone should be made to feel bad. I hope that obviously my goal here would be to try and convince you or make you feel more comfortable that getting the vaccine is the right thing to do. If we haven't, then you need to make the choice that's right for you. And there will come a time I think, and I'm almost positive, there will come a time where it will be mandatory, but it'll be that you'll have the same considerations that we have for the flu shot. So it's not gonna, it won't be any different. I mean, as far as what that might mean. So.
Yeah, and I'm personally aware of some situations that have occurred where conversations between vaccinated and unvaccinated employees have become heated, and I feel badly about that. On one hand, I understand, like I say, I understand the passion behind it. On the other hand, I feel badly that some of those situations occurred. I guess what I would ask is that we give each other grace on both sides of the coin, right? For those who are still unvaccinated, let's give them, let's give those folks some space. Let's give them, the time that they need to consider this choice. It's a personal choice. But at the same time, for those who are passionate about it and maybe have gotten a little heated about it, let's give them some grace as well and try to move forward with a clean slate. At the end of the day, we're all here to do the same thing, which is further the healing ministry of Jesus Christ. And we're going to have different opinions sometimes on the best way to do that, but we have to work together to make it happen. And it's right in our patient promise. Not only do we keep patients first, but we work together as one to keep patients first in everything we do. And so let's just continue to try to focus on that for sure. The last question that I had received is similar, and it says, what masking guidance can we offer for departments that are not completely vaccinated? So here in our non-patient facing department, I'm not going to identify it based on who sent it, but it says here in our non-patient facing department, we work in an enclosed area sealed off from patients. Most staff members are vaccinated, though there are individuals who have chosen to not get vaccinated. Everyone has had the opportunity to get vaccinated, and some have chosen not to, which is their right. This will not change, and these individuals have accepted the risk, however small, to themselves and their family. Per the CDC, masking is still recommended for everyone if at least one person in the room is not vaccinated. With that said, our masking in the department is quite arbitrary. We eat lunch together, we drink coffee together unmasked. In general, the sentiment seems to be evolving to a more lax masking approach given vaccination infection rates across Door County. So again, the initial question was, what masking guidance can we offer to departments that are not entirely vaccinated? I know since the beginning of this, we've always tried to start with the CDC in terms of our guidance. So current CDC guidance would say what?
Current CDC guidance is, just as I think the email indicated, is that if it's a group that if it's a group of people where not everyone's vaccinated, that everybody should wear a mask, and that's the CDC guidance. I think that what we're starting to see and what we will begin to see is maybe some lax attitudes about that. I think in the end, though, one of my problems with the CDC at this point is it's a little slow on the uptake. I think in order for people to really, people have said to me, I got to do all the same stuff. I mean, you tell me I got to wear a mask, I got to distance, I can't do all this sort of thing. What's the point of getting the vaccine? And I think they've got a point. And other than obviously what we've already talked about, that it's more than that. Getting the vaccine is for everyone. But I think that there's got to be a benefit to it. And so, like right now, Brian and I are sitting in this room. All these Q&As we've been doing, we have masks on. We don't right now because we're both fully vaccinated, and we're not going to get this disease. We also understand now with several studies that have come out in Israel and I forget what other country, that the vaccine does not, you don't transmit the virus. So if you're fully vaccinated, we always said it doesn't prevent against infection, but it prevents against disease, not infection. That's still true. You can still get some virus in your nose, but the odds of you transmitting it to any degree that it's relevant is nil. So you're not going to transmit it. So I guess that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question. From the technical side, we're going by CDC rules, but I think we're all professionals. I think in the end, if you choose not to get vaccinated, even if it isn't today, by next month or so, you never know, it will be. If you've chosen not to get vaccinated, that's fine. But just like with the flu vaccine, if you choose not to get the flu vaccine, you got to wear a mask, right? During the flu season. I think it's the same thing. So I think the onus is ultimately going to come down on those that have chosen not to get vaccinated.
Yeah. So Yeah, so again, short answer, we're going to stick with what the CDC is saying right now, but I completely agree with you. The CDC is moving much slower now in their recommendations, which is probably a direct response to early on in the pandemic. They were changing their recommendations
Right.
so fast that people were critical of that. Now they're changing their recommendations very slowly to the point where now we can nearly anticipate what they're going to do before they do it. An example of that is one of the regulations that the CDC still has on their website is that as employers, we should still be monitoring our employees' travel. And we've looked at that and gone, you know, okay, we'll monitor it, but there's really no, you know, travel's not really an issue these days.
It's
I mean,
not.
wherever you go, you kind of got the same level of risk, whether that's down to a store in Green Bay or across the state line or whatever. So it is a little bit more of a difficult thing to follow CDC guidance right now, but we're going to continue to try to do so for the time being.
I do want to point out that for what it's worth, you know, 100% of the physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants have gotten the vaccine, for whatever that's worth. I think, you know, that so we all have felt as though the data we've seen is adequate and sufficient enough, so we've all been vaccinated. So, and I only say that because I was in a meeting this morning that I think Brian referenced, and we're doing really well. There are other organizations where all the physicians have chosen not to get vaccinated, and for whatever reason. And the folks on the meeting were saying they really weren't sure why that was. But I do think that the folks on this meeting, as the leaders of rural health hospitals, were saying, you ought to tell everybody that. I mean, if you've got everyone is willing to do it, that should say something. So if it does, great. Otherwise, just so you know. Yeah,
and I know y'all are working on potentially putting out a letter too that you've talked about from our employed medical staff that would be to the community to say, hey, we've all decided to do this. We encourage you to do it as well.
Right.
So, well, great. All right. I don't see any other questions on the chat. Anything else that anyone has today? If not, the sun's still shining. It's a beautiful day out there. I hope everybody can get out and enjoy it. And again, happy Nurses Day. I know we have, I sent this out in an email earlier, but we've got some teams that are being recognized at the Golden Heart Awards tonight for work that's been done over the past year with COVID. And all that is really well-deserved recognition. And I only wish that we had a Golden Heart Award to give to each of you, because everybody deserves it. So have a great day. And any other questions come up, please let us know. We'll be happy to continue to field questions, even outside of this format. So thanks again. Thanks for joining me.
You bet. Thank you.
All right. Take care.